Before we begin this episode, I want to acknowledge that today's conversation touches on incredibly sensitive and emotional charged topics, the ongoing conflict between Israel and Gaza. This episode is a continual of my conversation with Willie, a Jewish man raised by Holocaust survivors. In our first episode, we explored the impact of generational trauma. Today, we go deeper into history, identity, and the heartbreak of war. I want to be transparent with you. My personal connection to this issue runs deep because my parents have opened their home to refugees from Syria, Afghanistan, and Gaza. I watched my Palestinian brother, who became family, rebuild his life in Norway, learn the language, get education, and save enough to build a home for his family back in Gaza. Yesterday, my mother called me to tell me that this house has been bombed. When someone you love is suffering, it becomes almost impossible to see the other side clearly. But I believe that healing doesn't come from echo chambers. It comes from listening. It comes from understanding the other person, to see what their wounds are, to understand how we can come to some sort of shared understanding of what the root cause actually is. And as hard as it is, I want this platform to be a place where every voice can be heard, even when our loyalties, grief, or lived experiences differ. My faith reminds me that Jesus led with compassion, truth, and love. So that is what I am aiming to do. Thank you for listening with an open heart. Welcome to Becoming Secure with Mike's Mindset. I had a aha moment when I was reading your website. And one of those moments were on the last page. I'm just gonna read it out loud because I thought it was really good, and I want to talk around that. Is that okay with you?
If I wrote it in a blog post, I made it public.
We tend to be less materialistic because we know how easily property and possessions can be taken away from us. We are very protective of our parents who went through life-changing experiences. Very often the roles are reversed even at a very young age. The world feels like a very dangerous place. There are perceived threats everywhere. As a result, there's a strong attachment to Israel. Israel is considered a lifeline in the event our home country becomes too dangerous. We know very well that when the persecution of Jews began in 1933, there were no safe havens. Consequently, we will not publicly criticize the Israel government even when we disagree with it. It was that point at the end there where you say, even when we disagree with it, that really got to me. And I want to share something because in 2016, when the refugee war broke out in Syria, when a lot of people were running from Syria and from Gaza, etc., it's been refugees around there many times, of course, but specifically I'm referring to around the time of 2016. During that time, my parents became host parents to refugees from Syria and Gaza. And since then, they have had kind of a rotation of refugees moving in to our house where they've kind of contributed to them starting over and getting a new life and having a second chance where there's not a war zone. So because I've had this growing relationship over the years with someone from Gaza, it's become very personal, especially what is going on in the present day. And what you wrote actually offered some perspective for me that finally led me to kind of understand a little bit more, because I understand that obviously there's always going to be two perspectives of a story, and that's just the case. We have our loyalties where we have our loyalties, and that makes perfect sense to me. And I would love for you to kind of explain a little bit more on kind of a personal level what that safe haven means to you and why that loyalty to Israel is what it is today.
Okay, and just to point out, my parents were refugees,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very sympathetic to refugees. I've supported Syrian refugees as well, and my synagogue sponsored a couple families. We donated all kinds of things to support them, and I've always been very sympathetic to refugees,
Mm-hmm.
and but Israel is critical to the Jewish community, the diaspora community as well. Not everybody in the diaspora realizes that or recognizes that, but in the 30s, when things got very bad in Europe for Jewish people, and for 2,000 years, anti-Semitism is very, very cyclical. It always
Mhm.
comes, it never disappears, it always comes back. And and in many of those instances, there was no place for Jewish people to go,
Mhm.
and they were totally victimized.
Right.
And the Jewish population in Europe were slaughtered. And that can't happen today because if things become too dangerous, and in certain places it started to become very dangerous for Jews, there's always the state of Israel where that will accept them.
Right.
I can basically show up in Israel, and because I'm Jewish, they will take me in.
Right.
And so we have to support, we have to support and defend Israel because that's our lifeline. And
Right.
it means like I can't even describe how important that is, considering how traumatized the Jewish community is from centuries of persecution.
Right.
And that if anything should happen to the state of Israel, we're done. I am, my life could be over.
Mm. So
And
it
uh,
almost seems like it almost seems like this theme of everything that we've kind of about today goes back to having a home, having a family, having someone to look up to, having somewhere to belong. And it speaks to the importance of all of these factors of community, of building each other up, of the importance of family, generational family, and the sense of belonging and have a home, somewhere to go to. And when you put it like that, it makes me really empathize with the Jewish community in a way that I might haven't done. I would, in no way, shape, or form would I consider myself an anti-Semite at all. My only concern lately has been that my loyalty has been elsewhere when it comes to this particular conflict, but that is not related to
I,
the
I,
history as a whole.
I,
Just, yeah,
and
just,
I understand that
yeah,
people are sort of split, that
right,
because it's a very complex conflict.
right,
That conflict, and also there's a very poor understanding of the history. That
right,
conflict
right,
began in even before the state of Israel. They were already there was already Arabs and Jews fighting before the state of Israel was declared.
right,
And part of the reason why the British just wanted to get out, because they were caught in the middle.
right,
But the day after the state of Israel was recognized by the UN, all the Arab countries attacked it,
mm,
wanted to wipe it out. And when they partitioned the state of Israel, they partitioned land with Palestinians.
mm-hmm,
And but the next day there was, and they were sure they were going to wipe the Jews right out of the Middle East. It
right,
didn't work out that way. So what happened was they actually they actually were defeated. The parcel of land that was supposed to go to Palestinians, part of it was gobbled up by Israel, part of it by Jordan. So it was gone. It's gone. And that's what happened. And in fact, 4 or 5 times there have been negotiations for a separate state for Palestinians,
mm,
which have always been rejected by the Palestinians.
mm,
Why? Because many people within that community do not want to have a state alongside a Jewish state. That's part of the complexity of this whole region, is that the Palestinians deserve their own state. It's only going to work if it's alongside a Jewish state.
right. You do a good job of explaining the complexities of the two situations here, because you explain the history of what it's like to be a survivor, and you talk about that deep trauma wound of not having a sense of belonging, not having that home, not having that community, and having that family, generational family to look up to. And that is such a deep wound that it goes across the entire Jewish community. And then to know then that Israel, to some extent, is threatening that. And that's how it's perceived by the Jewish community. And I think I'm happy that you could put a voice to that to kind of explain a little bit what it's like to be on the inside of that and looking at the situation. Because, of course, then you also have the other side of the coin where they too are trying to find their own justice in today's history, right? But I'm happy that you offer that perspective.
And I can tell you that the state of Israel has done certain things that I'm not proud of as well. I mean, it's not black and white.
Yeah.
And there are things they've done that I perceive to be not fair necessarily. But I can tell you that a lot of the critics of Israel have never been to Israel. They call it an apartheid state. It's not. There are 2 million Arabs living in this actual state of Israel that are equal citizens, and they get called colonizers. Everybody seems this perception that Israel is a white state. 1/3 of Israel came from Europe. The majority of Israelis are what called Sephardic. They're not really white. They were driven out from Arab countries, from Libya, from Syria, from Iraq, from Yemen. The countries, that's the largest portion of Israel.
Yeah.
It's not a colonizer state.
So what is the solution in your words or in your perspective? How do we find a happy medium in this case?
Until the countries recognize that Israel has a right to exist as well, how can you, who's there to negotiate with, right? And so if the Palestinian leadership wants to eliminate the state of Israel, you can't negotiate a peace. Then you have just ongoing war.
I mean, what's happening right now is essentially eliminating the opportunity to negotiate. I mean, you're eliminating Palestine right now. That's what's happening. So they're not even going to have a voice.
No, I don't. Israel's not trying to eliminate Palestine. They're just trying to eliminate Hamas.
Well, in the process, everyone is going down with them.
Well, I you know what? I'd like to know where a war has taken place where civilians haven't died.
Right. That would be ideal.
Right?
That would be
I'd like to
ideal.
know what kind of a war where civilians have died, and in particular where the army you're fighting is using civilians as shields.
Yeah.
Because they really, I mean, they're Islamic terrorists. I mean, they don't care. They really, they have a vision, which is an Islamic state replacing Israel. And so if half the Gazans are sacrificed to gain that, they don't care. They really don't care. And Gazans are stuck. There's no one else to choose from. Gaza is run by an Islamic terrorist. And that's very sad.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they can ever be liberated.
Yeah.
You think Hamas will ever lay down their arms and leave? No, they won't. And so when they ask for a ceasefire, that's not peace. That's just a pause in hostilities while they rearm so they can continue fighting. That's their goal. That's their goal. That's their negotiation position, is a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, but a permanent ceasefire for them is 5 years until they reorganize and attack again. And
are you talking about Israel or Palestine?
No, I'm talking about Hamas.
Okay.
And Hamas is not Palestine. I'm talking about Hamas. And so Israel's has reached the point they can't live like that. They can't live like that. And so the more right-wing parts of the state of Israel just want to get rid of Hamas, but that's impossible, in my view. And so when you say, what's my solution? I don't have one. because I really believe that Hamas is an impediment to peace.
Hmm.
Ceasefire is not peace.
I agree that ceasefire is not peace. I would have loved to see a world where they could coexist. I mean,
Me too.
that is the only option we have because no one is going to be eliminated on either end, at least ideally
I,
not, right?
I know Palestinians here, and I have no ill will towards them.
Yeah.
But I have no sympathy for terrorist organizations.
No, I
You
mean,
know,
of course not.
we haven't even got to Iran yet, so
Mm.
which is which is an example of what happens when you have a terrorist organization running a country.
Right. It is it's definitely a broad topic that we could probably dig into and go go on
But it has
for
nothing to
hours,
do
but
with
I
it has nothing to do
definitely
with trauma.
no, actually that's the thing. It has everything to do with trauma. We're in this
Right, because
situation as a
everybody
result
caught in
of
this
trauma.
is traumatized.
Exactly.
And I should tell you that since a third of Israel are descendants from Holocaust survivors, I would say, just think about how much intergenerational trauma
Mm-hmm.
is in that country.
Yeah.
It's
It's
enormous.
tremendous.
And,
Insane. It's insane.
and they're being constantly triggered by being attacked.
Yeah.
They're constantly being triggered.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of
But
trauma.
also the normalization of how to approach a conflict, right? Because the way that a conflict was approached prior was with war, and now that's happening again. So it is true for Israel too. They're also partaking in this. They're also using war as a means for control. We're seeing generational handling of conflict. That's also what we're watching here. That is also true.
Right. So when they get attacked, not surprised that there's an overreaction
Correct.
because trauma rules in that country. I talk about the Holocaust a lot, and I do a lot of education. And some people go, "Why are you talking about the Holocaust?" It's like over 80 years ago. It's over. It's not over.
We're literally watching the consequence of the Holocaust as we speak. That is what we're seeing in the Middle
But
East. It's just
they don't see it
trauma
because
leading into it.
and they don't see it because it doesn't impact on them. And also, it's very much invisible.
Actually, I think it's what
It,
you were talking about earlier. It's because they are not aware of it yet. You said that it required awareness for you to even start
right.
beginning your journey. It's awareness, and if these people aren't even aware of the work that needs to get done, and they're acting on habit or routine or generational patterns, then that's what we're going to continue to see. So it is a level of awareness too. And I think people who are struggling to understand people dwelling in the past, it's because it's not comprehensible to them. They can't even begin to look backwards, and that might be because it's so terrifying and intimidating to do so.
My next book, I came up with a great title, which is The Hidden Victims, because descendants of Holocaust survivors are also victims, but nobody realizes it.
Can you say the title again?
The hidden victims.
The Hidden Victims.
And some of them don't even realize themselves that they're victims, but they are. And it's the legacy of trauma that it keeps reappearing each generation. And at the end of the book, when I finish writing it, I will have suggestions on how to stop the transmission of trauma.
I love that. That sounds like a great book, and I'm really happy that you're writing it because I'm
Thank you.
sure it's going to help a tremendous amount of people because like I've said, there's so many eh, grandparents, great grandparents, parents that are result of war, coming from war or survivors of war in one shape or another. And I think they need to be validated and seen too, because there's so many changes that are happening so rapidly, and we all need to understand where it's all coming from, because otherwise it's hard to understand how to progress in the most meaningful and impactful way that is aligned with what human beings need. And I'm really grateful that you've come here today and shared so vulnerably about your story. So I just want to thank you for
Right.
being here.
That's right. And I just want to point out one other thing about the book is that I interviewed 100 people, and they were all descendants of Holocaust survivors. I focused on them because it's a community that I understand, that I'm close to, that would open up to me, which they all did. But people are traumatized not just from war, but other wars, famines, cultural genocide, like what's happened to Aboriginal people in Canada and the United States, in South Africa, because of apartheid, people who are victims of sexual violence and abuse. Trauma is huge. And this book will help all those people.
Yeah.
Because it's irrespective of what the source of the trauma is. It manifests itself in the same kind of ways. People being hypervigilant or distrustful, or on and on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why people shouldn't just say, "Oh, this is just a book about Holocaust descendant." It is, but but it applies to a much broader group of people.
Thank you for giving them all a voice.
It's not been easy.
Yeah, but it's very important that you're doing it. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate the time, Willie.
And thank you for giving me a platform. So I appreciate that as well. It was so great meeting you, and it was really, really a great discussion. I'm glad you brought up a lot of things that other people have not brought up when I've been interviewed. So you did a great job.
Oh, thank you. That means everything to me. I'm so happy that you said that.
No, you did. You really did.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Go find Out from the Shadows and other books that Willie has written in the description below. And as always, stay curious and get to know yourself better.